"Sir, you need to leave this property immediately, or I'll have to arrest you for trespassing." The sheriff's deputy wouldn't even look me in the eye as he said it. Trespassing on my own property. The HOA president, Margaret Chen, stood behind him with her arms crossed, and that infuriating, satisfied expression plastered across her face like she'd just won some kind of prize. What I didn't know yet was that my house was just one of 47 homes she'd illegally seized and sold, pocketing millions while destroying lives. My name is David Richardson, and I'm a mechanical engineer who works long hours and minds his own business. I bought my 3-bedroom ranch in Meadowbrook Estates back in 2012, drawn by the quiet streets and good schools for my 2 kids. The HOA seemed reasonable at first, just basic rules about lawn maintenance and exterior paint colours. I paid my dues on time, kept my grass trimmed, and never caused problems. I thought I was doing everything right. The nightmare started 6 months ago with a letter I never received. According to the HOA, I owed $375 in unpaid dues from a special assessment for neighbourhood landscaping improvements. The problem? I never got the notice about this assessment. My mail had been spotty for weeks, something I'd reported to the post office twice, but I had no idea this would cost me everything. When I finally did get correspondence from the HOA, it wasn't a polite reminder or even a second notice. It was a letter informing me that a lien had been placed on my property for unpaid dues, and that amount had ballooned to over $12,000, with late fees, legal fees, and interest compounding daily. $12,000 from an initial $375 I never knew I owed. I immediately called the HOA management office. The woman who answered, Sandra, spoke to me like I was an idiot trying to scam them. She insisted multiple notices had been sent to my address and that my failure to respond wasn't their problem. I explained about the mail issues, offered to pay the original amount immediately, and asked about setting up a payment plan for their inflated fees. She put me on hold for 15 minutes, then came back and said the matter was already in the hands of their attorneys and I needed to deal with them directly. The attorney's office was worse. They added another $2,000 in legal fees just for me contacting them, and when I tried to dispute the charges, they sent me a packet of documents showing that according to HOA bylaws, they had the right to auction my property to satisfy the debt if it remained unpaid for 90 days. I had 2 weeks to come up with $14,000 or lose my home. I drained my savings account. I borrowed money from my brother. I even took out a high-interest personal loan, scrambling to gather the funds because losing my house wasn't an option. My kids lived with me every other week, and this was the only stability they had after their mother and I split up. I called the attorney's office the day before the deadline with proof I'd secured the funds and could wire the money that afternoon. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson," the paralegal told me, not sounding sorry at all. "The property has already been sold at auction. The sale was finalized yesterday." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Yesterday? The deadline is tomorrow. You said I had until tomorrow. The auction date was set 30 days ago. You should have received notification." "I never received anything about an auction. That's not our concern. The sale is final." I hired a lawyer that same day, a sharp woman named Patricia Gomez who specialized in real estate law. She reviewed every document, her expression growing darker with each page. Finally, she looked up at me and said the words that made my blood run cold. "David, they didn't follow proper foreclosure procedures. Not even close. But proving it and getting your house back before the new owners take possession is going to be nearly impossible in the time frame we have." That's how I ended up in my driveway 3 weeks later, facing down a sheriff's deputy while Margaret Chen watched with barely concealed glee, and strangers prepared to move into the home I'd worked 12 years to pay off. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how I fought back against this corrupt HOA, hit that subscribe button, because what I discovered next exposed something way bigger than just my house. But in that moment, standing there being told to leave my own property, I made a decision. I wasn't going quietly. I pulled out my phone and started recording. For the record, I'm David Richardson, the legal owner of this property. I have mortgage documents proving I paid off this house 3 years ago. I'm being forcibly removed based on an HOA foreclosure that I believe was conducted illegally." The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I have a court order." "I understand you're doing your job," I said calmly, keeping my phone steady, "but I'm stating for the record that I dispute the validity of this foreclosure." Margaret stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Richardson, you had ample opportunity to pay your debts. Your failure to be a responsible homeowner isn't our problem. Now please leave before this becomes more unpleasant than it needs to be." Something in her tone struck me as off, too confident, too rehearsed, like she'd done this before. I grabbed what I could from my house that day, filled my truck with clothes and important documents, and spent that night in a hotel room making phone calls. Patricia was already filing emergency motions, but she warned me the courts moved slowly. I needed something faster, something that would stop this before the new owners established legal residency. That's when I started digging into Margaret Chen's background and the HOA's financial records. What I found in those first few hours of searching made me realize my situation wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern. I spent 3 days buried in public records at the county courthouse, barely sleeping, living off coffee and vending machine snacks. My lawyer Patricia had subpoenaed the HOA's financial documents, but I wasn't waiting for the legal system to catch up. I needed answers now, and what I discovered made my stolen house look like just the tip of an enormous, corrupt iceberg. The first breakthrough came when I cross-referenced property records with HOA liens. In the past 4 years, Meadowbrook Estates HOA had foreclosed on 47 properties, 47 homes in a neighborhood of just 300 houses. That's nearly 16% of the community. The pattern was identical in every case. Small initial debt, usually under $500, astronomical fees added within weeks, rushed foreclosure timelines, and auctions held with minimal notice. But here's where it got interesting. 32 of those 47 properties had been purchased at auction by the same 3 buyers: Chen Property Holdings, Westside Investments LLC, and Sunrise Realty Group. I ran corporation filings on all 3 companies. Chen Property Holdings was owned by Margaret Chen's husband Richard. Westside Investments listed Margaret's sister as the registered agent. Sunrise Realty Group took more digging, but I eventually found Margaret's name buried in the corporate structure as a silent partner. The HOA president was orchestrating foreclosures on homes in her own neighborhood, then buying them through shell companies at a fraction of their value. My house, worth $350,000, had been auctioned for $18,000. The buyer was Westside Investments. Margaret Chen had essentially stolen my home and was about to flip it for a massive profit. I printed everything, every corporation filing, every property record, every auction notice. Then I started calling the other victims. The first number I tried was disconnected. The second went to voicemail. But the third call, to a man named Robert Torres who'd lost his home 2 years ago, finally gave me a live person. "They destroyed my life," Robert told me, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I fought for months. Spent everything I had on lawyers, but by the time the courts acknowledged there were irregularities, new owners had moved in and established residency. The judge said his hands were tied. Did you ever connect with other victims?" I asked. I tried. Most people were too broken by the experience to keep fighting. A few of us talked about a class action lawsuit, but we couldn't afford the legal fees, and no attorney would take it on contingency. Margaret's too well connected. Her brother-in-law is a county commissioner. That explained why this had gone unchallenged for so long. But connections only protect you until someone builds an airtight case, and I was building exactly that. I contacted 17 former homeowners over the next 2 days. 9 agreed to meet with me and Patricia. Each story was heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure. A retired teacher lost her home over a $400 assessment she paid, but the HOA claimed they never received. A single father was foreclosed on while he was deployed overseas with the National Guard. An elderly couple lost the house they'd lived in for 30 years over a dispute about the color of their mailbox. Patricia's eyes lit up as she listened to their testimonies. "This isn't just civil fraud anymore, David. This is a criminal conspiracy. With this many victims and this clearer pattern, we're looking at RICO violations, wire fraud, maybe even racketeering charges. While Patricia worked the legal angles, I went after the public relations nightmare. I created a detailed timeline documenting all 47 foreclosures, complete with photos of the victims, their stories, and the corporate connections showing Margaret's involvement. Then I did something Margaret never expected from a quiet engineer who kept to himself. I called every local news station in the city. The first two weren't interested. The third, a young investigative reporter named Jessica Park from Channel 7, met me at a coffee shop and listened to my entire presentation. When I finished, she sat back and let out a low whistle. "This is bigger than you realize," she said. "We've been getting tips about HOA corruption across the county for months, but we couldn't find a clear pattern. You just handed me that pattern on a silver platter." Jessica's story aired 6 days after I was forced out of my house. The segment was devastating, featuring interviews with 5 victims, corporation filings showing Margaret's connections to the shell companies, and a county auditor Patricia had convinced to review the HOA's financial records, who admitted on camera that the foreclosure procedures appeared to violate state law. The community exploded. By the next morning, the HOA's management company had resigned. Margaret Chen's phone number and email were flooded with angry messages. A county investigation was launched, and most importantly, a judge issued an emergency injunction freezing all property transfers related to HOA foreclosures in Meadowbrook Estates pending a full investigation. I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my situation? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. But Margaret wasn't done fighting. She hired an expensive defense attorney who immediately attacked the injunction, arguing that halting the property transfers would harm innocent buyers who'd purchased homes in good faith. For 3 agonizing days, I thought she might actually win. Then Patricia filed something that changed everything. She'd found evidence that Margaret had backdated documents, forged signatures on foreclosure notices, and in 12 cases, conducted auctions without ever sending any notification to the homeowners at all. Several victims had affidavits swearing they never received a single piece of correspondence before losing their homes. When Patricia presented this evidence, along with testimony from a postal worker who admitted Margaret had paid him to intercept mail for certain addresses, the judge's face turned to stone. "Mrs. Chen," the judge said coldly, "I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. I'm also voiding every foreclosure sale conducted by Meadowbrook Estates HOA in the past 4 years, pending individual review." The courtroom erupted. I sat there, hands shaking, barely able to process what I'd just heard. 47 families were getting their cases reviewed. My house was coming back. 2 weeks later, I moved back into my home. The new owners had been there less than a month and left furiously, threatening lawsuits that went nowhere once the criminal charges against Margaret became public. Margaret Chen was arrested and charged with fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Her husband and sister faced charges too. The shell companies were dissolved, and every penny of profit from the illegal sales was frozen. The district attorney told me the investigation had expanded beyond our neighborhood. They'd found evidence Margaret had been consulting with HOA presidents in other communities, teaching them her foreclosure scheme in exchange for a cut of the profits. The total number of illegally seized homes across the county might exceed 200. I stood in my kitchen 3 months after that horrible day in my driveway, making coffee in the house I thought I'd lost forever, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not just relief, but pride. I'd fought back against a system designed to crush people like me, and I'd won. More importantly, I'd helped 46 other families get justice too. Margaret Chen is currently awaiting trial, facing up to 20 years in prison. The HOA has been dissolved and reformed under state supervision. And me? I'm still just a mechanical engineer who minds his own business. But now everyone in this neighborhood knows that when someone tries to steal what's yours, you don't just roll over. You fight back with everything you've got, and you don't stop until justice is served.